He was drunk. I had gotten used to this, as I rarely even saw him sober. There was something different about him tonight. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was something quite off about my father. Something frightening. He sat in his lounge chair, as he usually did on Saturday nights, with a remote control in one hand and an almost empty bottle of vodka in the other. My father wasn't watching television, though. He had his eyes fixated solely on me. I tried to ignore him. I tried to convince myself that it wasn't there, that the slumped figure was seeing out of the corner of my eye wasn't real. After what seemed like an eternity, my father spoke. "Maria," he said in a slurred, tired voice, "could you be a doll and fetch me another drink?" As my father spoke, he never broke eye contact with me. He just sat there with a small grin on his face, watching me. My mother was in the kitchen, washing dishes. "You had enough for tonight, Jack. I think it's best for you to just go to sleep." My father didn't move. His smile faded into a scowl, and he said in a soft, calm tone, "Maria?" My mother looked up from washing the dishes. "Yes," she said. My father exhaled and broke eye contact with me for the first time in 10 minutes. I felt a small weight be lifted off my shoulders. My father then looked up to my mother and stared at her, his dark, beady eyes fixated on my mother. After what seemed like forever, my father spoke. He said in a dark, ominous tone, "Maria, go get me another fucking drink." An angry look fell upon my mother's face. "Go get your own goddamn drink," she mumbled under her breath. I don't think she meant for my father to hear her, but she said it just a bit too loud to not go unnoticed. This sent my father into an absolute rage. He stood up and darted forward towards my mother. My father then brought his hand back and smacked her. She cried out in pain and fell over, holding the right side of her face. "Jack, calm down!" she screamed as she fumbled frantically to her feet. As my mother got up, there was a red handprint imprinted on her right cheek. "That looks good for you," my father said. After he said this, he went into a hysterical fit of laughter. As my father was laughing hysterically, my mother opened the kitchen drawer to get the longest, sharpest knife we had. She slowly backed away from my father and towards her phone. "Just calm down, Jack. I'll get you your drink for you. Just sit back down." My father looked up, still laughing, and saw her heading towards the phone. "Oh, you bitch!" he choked out between his hysterical laughter. My father charged towards my mother and viciously ripped the knife out of her hands. He pushed her into the corner and kicked her several times in her rib cage. He never stopped laughing. I looked away. I hit my face into my open hands. It wasn't happening. Tears streamed down my face. I heard my mother's gargled cries of desperation as she was stabbed multiple times. My father never stopped laughing. After my mother finally ceased screaming, there was only silence. My father slowly walked out of the kitchen and slowly turned his head to look at me. He smiled. It was the kind of smile only a madman could make. And my father laid down in front of me and pushed his face up against mine. I could smell the alcohol in his rancid breath as he said, "Why so serious?" I ignored him. He wasn't there. He wasn't real. He held my arms down and placed the blade of the kitchen knife in my mouth. "Why so serious?" he said again, this time in a darker tone. He laughed a long, strenuous laugh. My father's voice was becoming increasingly strained. "Let's put a smile on that face," he snarled as he cut deeply into the sides of my mouth. The cuts he made somewhat resemble a clown's everlasting grin. He never stopped laughing. And that is how I got my scars.